I've always wondered, and I'm going to be eating pizza as I talk here, but why do we worship the cross on Ash Wednesday, not Ash Wednesday, on Holy Thursday? Like, we have
Good Friday?
I should clarify, we're not worshiping. It is Good Friday.
Good Friday.
Okay. Why do we reverence it? Because we don't worship the cross, because obviously you only worship one God, because there only is one God that deserves worship. There's one God, period. But that's another time. Maybe I'll add that to our list. One God.
All right.
Why the cross? Because St. Paul wrote to the letter to the Corinthians he wrote to them saying, basically, he got a question. And the question was like, hey, we realize that all these pagan gods aren't real. And first of all, Corinth was like the Vegas of the day, the Las Vegas of the day.
Yeah, okay.
That's where all the military leaders went if they survived living through the Roman military. If they survived long enough, they got like property and housing, and then they got to move to Corinth. Imagine a bunch of really bored soldiers living with cash. It's not exactly going to be a PG environment. It was basically the Las Vegas of the day. But St. Paul, sounds right. It was either St. Paul or it was St. Paul. Went to Corinth, and maybe it was St. Peter. I can't remember now. My mind's blanking a little bit. But went to St. Peter, and he said, hey, I'm going to go there. I'm going to try to set up a church in Corinth, which, given that context, people might have kind of laughed at. I'd be like saying, hey, I'm going to go and evangelize to people in Las Vegas. And everybody's going to be like, what? I mean, you can do it. I guess that's probably, where people are hurting the worst. But it doesn't, at first glance, it seems kind of funny, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what the question that arose is like, hey, all these people would go to like the Temple of Apollo, and they had, the sacrifice, the meat to the gods and stuff like that there. And early Christians there said, hey, we realize that these gods don't actually exist, that there is only one God. How is it okay for us then to go and eat in this place? Just basically go in for a nice beef dinner. Is that okay? Because we realize that we're not doing anything wrong. And St. Paul replied to them saying, hey, obviously they live in a collectivistic culture. We live in an individualistic culture in the West. They lived in a collectivist. Everything was for, saving the face of the group or making the group better. It's not bad, it's different, and it's really different, really, really different to Americans because most Americans don't quite get the idea.
No, we are,
Again, it's not bad. But where he went with it, he said, hey guys, we are a group here. Like, as the early Christians, we are a group. We need to, if somebody's going to get confused by watching you go in and eat the temple meat, then it's probably best not to do that thing. People are going to be like, oh, isn't that a Christian? Oh, that person's now worshiping in our temple. You know you're not worshiping. Everybody, all the other Christians know it, but they think you are. All these misconceptions construed about Christianity in the early church. And again, this is all in a collectivistic culture, so it doesn't properly translate, in every way to our society today. But I see a lot of the same problems with the reverencing of the cross on Holy Good Friday. On Good Friday. Because we go up and, it's a pretty common stereotype. People believe that Catholics worship Mary and they worship statues. So why are we giving them something, to look at in the wrong light? We know we're not worshiping the cross, but it seems like the same argument could be made from the early church to what we got now.
It was interesting. Why do we reverence the cross if it could be taken? Well, one, I would bring up that in ancient Rome, they were going to the pagans' church in order to eat the meat. Here, they would be coming to our church. So there's that to consider. But that is interesting. Like,
right. The analogy.
Yeah, say that again. You've got a poor connection.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Wi-Fi here at St. Mary, for everything that they do right, the Wi-Fi in Hillside is not always one of them. But I was just saying that just because they were going to the pagan temple, like the idea is that they're similar in the areas of they're both deceptive, not maybe intentionally, but they are like deceiving to outside lookers.
That is, yeah. Yeah. No, I guess that I wouldn't. I don't like the deceiving. It's not deceiving. It is something that can be taken out of context or in the incorrect way. That is true. That's for sure. But
right.
There should be, on their own behalf, there should be a certain respect for what we're doing as they are in our church. And if they don't understand it, then they should ask us. But, in natural human folly, most people don't. That's why we get so many things with, like, people not believing, or people seeing things about the Catholics that they're not true. They just don't really understand that.
I mean, and that goes for every religion, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's why whenever I meet somebody who believes something else, I'm always asking them, "Oh, so what do you believe? Like, what do you believe? This, what do you?" I want to understand from their perspective what they believe. And that's why, I don't usually try to be like even that if I do research about something, like even some of the movements today that are questionable movements or just flat out stupid movements, when I do research into them, I try to do the research as if I were actually believing them, because then I know what they're hearing.
Right. Quick question. Before we dive back into the whole cross thing, there's 2 people watching the live stream right now.
Is that us? Yeah, that's us.
Okay. Also, is there a way to record this? Like, can you just throw this up on your channel afterward?
Yeah, YouTube automatically does that.
Nice.
Yep.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
No.
All right. I actually.
Yeah, I posted it to the Facebook page.
Yeah, I actually went and shut off the.
Hey, turn it on. There we are.
No, I didn't shut the live stream off. I transitioned to that screen and shut the microphone off because you left. There was no conversation. It was like an intermission kind of thing. Yeah. So why do we?
So back to the idea with the cross.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm thinking of is they're in our church, and if they don't understand that, there might. The difficulty is, we know that people don't always ask. More often than not, they don't ask or try and understand. So we're kind of back to square one. While one, they should be respecting us in our own church, they should also and understand us.
Well, right. There needs to be a common respect among religions, whether they agree, or not, because everybody is entitled to the right, the right of our own opinion.
Yay, 3 watching. I would just like anybody who watches to please like, because that gets YouTube to share it more.
The video itself. Because it's my brother's YouTube channel, and he gets...
Like and subscribe.
You can subscribe to Paradox Paranoia.
Like and subscribe, please. Yes. Yay, now there's 4. The numbers are rising.
Cool.
So who does the fault fall upon in this case? Because it is technically, it would be, it's on the person joining our church for our Good Friday service. It is their responsibility to respect us, but at the same time, it is our responsibility to teach them. So if we don't have immediate...
So I guess what my question roots itself in is, why do we do it in the first place? It also doesn't seem to make sense to me. It looks a lot like worshiping the cross on Good Friday.
It does.
Not reverencing it. So, like, what's actually going on there?
So, because I believe it is it's been blessed. So it's, and they say, like, behold the wood of the cross on which our Savior hung. Saying that they're saying that as in it's literally, because of the blessing and transubstantiation, I would guess it is literally the actual cross. That's my guess. I don't know what. Actually, I've got my catechism with me, but I.
Saying that the cross on Good Friday, if it's been blessed, is a literal cross. I would have to disagree with that.
It's at least a strong symbol of, that's for sure. That's.
Yeah, okay, I can get behind a strong symbol of it, just like a statue is a symbol of, whatever it is. If I made a statue, of your face, it'd be a symbol of your face, I guess.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, so it's, well, I also think a statue is slightly different than a symbol, but I guess it's a symbol. It's kind of like putting a picture of your family in your wallet. You love your family,
right.
So you have a picture of them. Kind of a thing. It's a reminder of them. Hey, which one of your friends stopped watching?
They're doing homework.
Yeah, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's definitely, most certainly not a transubstantiation like in the Eucharist. It is, but symbolically speaking, it is the cross, and thus we worship it reverence it. My bad, sorry. We reverence it because it is. I don't think it's in the Bible per se, but somewhere I saw that they explained how the cross is the number one biggest religious symbol, or like widest known symbol in the world. Everybody knows the cross.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because not everybody knows, the Jewish, Star of David. It's pretty common known to us, I guess. But not everybody knows it. Not everybody knows, actually, I don't even know, like, what symbols, a Buddhist monk would be wearing. That's a little bit different because, yes, it's a religion, but it's also kind of like a way of life. So that's a different topic.
Which one did you say? What did you say?
Buddha.
Buddhist, yes.
We all know the symbol of the cross, but we don't know all, like, not everybody knows the Star of David. It's pretty common, but not everybody knows, like, an Islamic symbol. Why do we know that? Why is it the cross that stands out so much? Is it just, a hype object? Everybody thinks, hey, that's kind of neat. It looks kind of cool.
Oh.
I see a lot of rappers wearing it on their chains and stuff.
I wouldn't
Like,
even say that it looked pretty cool, because there are other religious symbols that look really cool. And
the Cairo or like Celtic knots. Cool.
oh my goodness, so cool. But but the cross, as bland as it's simple. It's super simple, and it sticks out more. Everybody knows what the cross is. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who don't.
Right. But that's everything, yeah.
But yeah, there's everything. But it is one of, if not the biggest, I believe it is the biggest known religious symbol in the world. For sure in Western culture.
Right, but why?
Why? Well, one, it is a very significant symbol, that's for sure. It's a symbol. We've kind of established that. That symbol in particular did something that none of the rest did. Star of David, yeah, I don't even know the origin of the Star of David, but the cross is a sign of the literal salvation, the saving of humankind, the climax and conclusion. Is it the conclusion of God's plan of salvation?
Made by God for God to live in perfect unity with Him. But interesting. Salvation leads up to that moment.
Yep.
But I guess we're not fully captivated by it until we get into.
None of that came through. I heard up to.
Oh, I apologize. Hello?
Hello? Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me now? I'm not supposed to say that.
You're muffled.
I broke it. How's that?
Yep. Microphone's picking you up.
Is that perfect? I was covering it up by accident. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my question. That was my question on the cross and the nature of it. One thought that I've always had on it is it's the same. I guess I was going for the same idea. Is why is Jesus such a historical figure? I heard the argument, Jesus was just a random Jew, that happened to live at the time. Yeah, but if he was just a random Jew, why do we still remember him? Why do we mark our calendar, Ad Domine, the year of our Lord?
Yeah.
I mean, in schools we put before Common Era to remove religion from it, which is a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But was it that Jesus' life, if he wasn't God, so significant? Why did it matter? Like, literally, there was tons of people who died on the Roman cross, tons of Jews that died on the Roman cross for doing the exact same things he did.
They're not quite the same things, though.
Well, just name it.
What?
Just name a few.
Differences?
Yeah.
He's the only one who claimed to be God. Nope.
I mean, that we know of to start.
But Lord Liar Lunatic. If he was actually the Lord, if he was actually a lunatic, or if he was just a liar. If he was just a liar, then he'd have saved himself death. He could have just pulled back what he was saying, just admitted that, it was just a lie. If he was a lunatic, which would be like anybody else who would have died on a cross because of it, would have been a lunatic. Or the Lord. But we already know, Jesus was the one that was the Lord. So if he was if they were a lunatic, then they wouldn't have been able to make sound arguments. Like, some of the things that Jesus said, his sound argument, they were very firm and very sound. Like, it's absurd the level of wisdom that he speaks and the number of times he does it. Like, even the Pharisees tried to set up traps for him that he couldn't get out of, and he navigates through them just fine. So he can't be a lunatic. He knows what he's talking about. And thus, the only other option must be the Lord. And thus, that would give him reason to die. And it would give him reason to, one, stand out as an extreme figure, like he does. And actually have sound and good arguments. Because if he's God, I'm pretty sure he can argue better. Like, there's actually, I don't remember the verse, but a Bible verse that is going on saying things like, for God's lowest idiocy is still greater than the human's greatest wisdom, or man's greatest wisdom. God's weakest weakness is still stronger than man's strongest strength. Like, it's, God is just that far above the level. So if Jesus was actually the Lord, of course he's going to be like that, above that level. And it gives him reason to back.
Let me throw an objection in there quick.
Say that again? You're cutting out pretty bad.
Picking me up?
Yeah.
I get you. Here we go. Gonna drop you. Drop.
You're back.
We're back.
Yep.
I'm having a really hard time not singing copyrighted songs right now while being back. Eminem, Look Who's Back, or The Boys Are Back in Town.
Yeah.
I forget who sings that, but anywho, the objection I have to your arguments, you got the liar, lunatic, Lord. You said that if he was a liar, he would have had no reason to die on the cross. He could have repented. However, Socrates died for a non-religious reason. Socrates' reasoning is that, hey, I want to stand by what I believe, and in order that people will remember it, which obviously worked out pretty well for him, seeing that we're still talking about him, 2019 years later, plus or minus a couple hundred years.
Well then, still liar, every lie, they say to, what's it called? They say to make a good lie, it needs to be simple. It needs to be very simple, and you need to tell it a lot. We know Jesus told it, if it was a lie, we know he told it a lot. That's for sure. He spoke it a lot. For 3 years, we believe his ministry was. And, then the time when he was 12 teaching the priests in the temple. So we know that he told the lie a lot. So if it's a lie, any good lie is simple and told a lot, because that gets people to believe it. That's what works. But God's lie, Jesus' lie, is not simple at all. It is very firm-founded, very well-made. It's there's little to no nook or cranny. I would say that there's no nook or cranny that you can weasel your way into to prove that he's not telling the truth. But the problem with saying that is, if you don't believe already that Jesus is the Lord, you're going to be able to, any of the arguments against, you can find nooks and crannies, of course, and just none of the arguments against are going to easily be accepted, because they're just, they're supposedly religion-based. But
right, which which is part of the reason I enjoy philosophy so much, because it argues for the existence of a divine creator without using divine revelation. I think both have their proper place, but they're useful in different situations. If I'm talking to a devout Catholic, I'm going to use theology, the study of God, theology. If I'm using philosophy, philosophia, love.
You're cutting out a little bit more. Love of what?
Divine. I'm going to be using not divine revelation.
Yeah, what did philosophy translate to?
Oh, philosophia, love of wisdom.
Love of wisdom.
It's Greek. Yeah. I just had a question. You're talking about lies being made simple. Did you have an example of one?
Depends on how political you want to get. No, I know people who have been arguing that, talking to people at work, he said that any argument I bring up about the Twin Towers, he can come up with a disproof for. Yeah, so that was interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I would, Hitler told lies, right?
Technically, a lie is the absence of the truth, which is the absence of a good. So something spoken that with the intention to deceive, I guess, is privation of goodness. I don't really know where I'm going with that. I'm just analyzing the word.
It's fascinating to research Hitler and maybe look into some of his quotes and things, because he was a genius. He knew his stuff. Because that quote that I said, make a lie, tell it often, make it simple and tell it often. That's Hitler. That's something he said.
Quoted him.
Yes.
Wow.
But look at Hitler, because it worked for him.
But it's pretty obvious to see that his actions were not rooted in the common good, in goodness. So his actions were rooted in the privation of good, which is evil.
Deprivation, is that what you said? With a D? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it has no good.
Deprived of good.
It's lacking in it. It's deprived of it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just making sure I understood you right. I didn't pick up the D, the deprivation. So yes, what Hitler did was very deprived of good. There's a concept for you. As Catholics, we believe that evil and the deprivation of good exists for one of two reasons: free will and a greater good. So, to make it simple, to just say a greater good. The Holocaust, take that into that scenario, we can see very clearly the free will involved. Hitler had complete free will to do what he did. And I don't want to limit just to Hitler, because now, while he was the key ingredient in the mix, he was, the people that were following him, the Nazis, were technically there of their own free will as well, as far as I'm aware. They might have been forced, but I'm not sure.
Well, even if they were forced, they still have a choice. That's the one thing you can never take away from a human, is their ability to choose.
Yeah. Because you can threaten people, but they still have the choice of death.
Right. Well, and the exception that I might draw is, it's limiting somebody's ability to make the choice. Technically, they still have a choice. So what I'm talking about here is narcotics, drugs, somebody,
Okay.
A mind-altering state. And what that does is you have two things that are required for an action. You have the elicited act of the will and the commanded act of the will. The elicited the example we used in class with Dr. Patricia Calton, she said, like, imagine you want to get up in the cafeteria and you want to grab a piece of cake, right? He said, first you need to think about it. You got to will in your mind, think, have a concept, a spiritual thing. I want the cake. Do you have the cake yet? No. That's where the commanded act of the will is. It's the actual, like, I'm commanding my body to get up and move and get the cake.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening in a drug-altering state is you're lowering the ability of somebody to use their, like, elicited act of the will.
So I would draw a line here. Just it's not really drawing a line, but editing terminology. So you like we talked about this a bit in TOB, that love is willing the good of the other. Well, there's a difference between wanting what's good for them and willing what's good for them. This is what I'm gonna draw the line. Just kind of redefine terminology here. To want something, you can merely think it up. You can want that cake, but to actually will having that cake means to do the action, to do something about it. You actually get up and get the cake. So, I'm still saying the same thing you are. I'm just kind of changing the words a bit. Not changing the meanings, but just the words used to achieve the meanings. So you get to the will, and then you start, like you're saying with the narcotics and stuff, you can damper their will, but not their want. Now, thinking about this, you can make it so that the brain can literally not want something. It cannot think at all. You can make it to that point where the brain can do nothing to psychologically want. You can no longer make the thoughts as, I want to do this. But as we are both physical and spiritual beings, the physical, the drugs and whatnot, that doesn't affect our spiritual being. So as a will... Directly, correct. It would have to be an act of the body through the... so it can affect the spiritual by affecting the body to do something that would affect the spiritual. So,
see, that raises an interesting point, and I won't interrupt you here, but just when we come back to it, where does rationality come from? And I'll just talk about that in a little bit. We still got to get back to our greater good and free will discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you can limit the body easily. That's easy to do. But even if you cannot, in your physical brain, come up with the idea to want something, the soul does still have the ability to want. Like, it is a natural, built-in to our being, through the way that we are created, it is built into our being to want God. That's our purpose for being here, and that's why most people can't. Famous. I don't remember his name, but kind of famous quote. There's a God-shaped hole in our hearts. That is.
There's a philosopher named. This is potentially the wrong philosopher, but Descartes. I say Descartes.
I don't think it was Descartes who said that. I know that they do, but it was an atheist who said that. He believed that it is impossible to actually be happy. But anyway, so the soul can still want things. So the want of good. That's actually where any bad action comes through a good seen through it. A good that you want, that you see coming from that bad action. You don't see the badness in the action necessarily. You can.
Right.
That's
Actually, that's Saint Thomas Aquinas, the language right there. You cannot will an evil as evil. You see a good in that evil that you are desiring. So, for example, the example that a lot of people use is Saint Augustine. When he was a child, went out with a group of rowdy boys. He wasn't a saint before he was a saint.
No, he was not.
He went out with a group of rowdy boys, and they would just go and steal stuff. The case, the case he's talking about is peaches off a peach tree from a guy who owned it. And he said, "Why did I do it?" This is in his Confessions, St. Augustine's Confessions. And he says, "Why did I do it? Like, I had better peaches at home." And so obviously it wasn't for the desiring of those peaches. So I was doing it solely because it was evil, and there was a thrill in that evil, which is where St. Thomas Aquinas looks at it and said, no, you're not doing it for the sake of that evil. You're doing it for this perceived good in that evil. So like
the
being
thrill
there with the guys and with the friends and for the adrenaline rush and the thrill of it all. Those are the perceived goods. Because if we actually saw evil for what it was, we wouldn't choose it.
Yeah.
Which is why we will not fall out of heaven once we're there. Yeah, we'll still have free will because that's necessary for us to be happy. But we will see evil as evil for what it is, and we will see good for what it is good for what it is. That's Dr. Peter Kraft that said that.
You said we'll desire evil for what it is and good for what it is?
We will see, like in heaven, in the beatific vision, we will see evil for what it is, and we will see good for what it is.
Anyway, to relate
Which
this
is why
back,
we won't choose out.
to relate this all back to what we were actually talking about. Anyway, so our soul in itself has the ability to will and want, as well as our body, and that can be seen through the brain. But we can dilute the brain, and we can do our best to remove free will, but that actually alters things. So if we no longer have that choice of free will, the sin no longer falls on us.
That's true.
Which,
to put into perspective, means that a person who goes on a mass rampage, shooting or something like that, isn't morally culpable, and we shouldn't give them the death penalty then.
No.
Or really, even the people who are inflicting the death penalty aren't doing it by choice. It's just a random fluctuation of input energies, output energies in a complex pattern.
Yeah. No. Yeah. If you are unconscious, I think that's the best way I can put it. Unconscious, not necessarily meaning like you passed out or you're asleep, but you're just not aware. You're not lucid, so to speak.
Right.
Then you cannot possibly sin. Because a sin, in order to be a sin, you must do it willfully. It has to be your own will for it to be a sin.
That's true.
Now, to bring this back to the example I was using, Hitler, the Holocaust. So we imagine, even the Nazis, they must have had some sort of choice to be there. Even if they were only there by their choice of fear of death, if they didn't follow, there's still the choice there. And so we can see very clearly it is an act of free will. The Holocaust is very strongly an act of free will. But a lot of people will make the argument towards it was still a very horrific event, and it's so utterly horrific. How could God even allow that through human, is there nothing he could have done to prevent it? Well, yeah, he could have. That is, the fact. God is technically, he's unlimitable, except for if he uses his own power to limit himself, which he does. Free will in itself does that. But it is Whoa, brain fart. Bad time for that to happen. So people say, like, the Holocaust is something so bad. Why didn't God do something? He could have done something to stop it. Well, I like the example of to explain because as I said earlier, there's two reasons that God allows evils in the world. That is, one, our free will, which we were just discussing, and two, the greater good that can come from it. The best way I can think of this, God doesn't want anything bad for us. It's like a father who can see the future, and he's watching his son up on the roof, cleaning the roof, shoveling the roof, doing something on the roof. And he knows that in the future, his son is going to fall off the roof and is going to break his leg. He can see the future. He knows that's going to happen. Any good father in no way would let their son stay on the roof. Like, he'd make his son get off the roof so he doesn't break his leg. That's the loving thing to do. And that's how most people view the matters like these, like the Holocaust. God could have stopped this. Like, if he's really loving, he would have stopped something like that, wouldn't he? Well, what's more important, though, is if the father looks even farther into the future and sees his son goes to the hospital for breaking his leg and meets the love of his life, who he's going to marry and have an absolutely amazing life with. He's going to love her with all his heart. Suddenly, here's this greater good that this is going to make my son's life happier than it would be otherwise. So now the question is, the son's going to break his leg, but at the same time, the love of his life, who he's going to marry. Now, there's not even a question. The father's going to let the son break his leg so that he can have this greater good that's going to come later. Yeah, it's going to hurt, and it's not going to be fun, but he's going to later have, like, in American culture, we are a very, I forget the terminology. It's basically means we like immediate pleasure. We don't like to wait for it.
Right.
But, if a lot, in this case, it's like, well, yeah, in that sort of a cultural sense, we would be like, oh, well, it's going to be hurting in the present, but knowing in the future there's going to be a greater good. That's where it's difficult to, kind of see that, where it's something that a greater good that's going to come later. Our culture doesn't like looking at that very much, even though it's very important.
Right. So I guess my question that comes out of this, and I have my own answer, but I want to hear what you have to say, is what is the greater good that could have come out of the Holocaust? I mean, you try looking into somebody's eyes that, I've been to Auschwitz before. I've seen the buildings where these crimes against humanity took place. Like, how do you tell somebody that's been there, oh, there's a greater good here? What is that greater good?
Yeah, it is a hard question. I've been asked it before. To the person in the chat, hi. I'm trying to type. I can't. For some reason, YouTube's not letting me type. Just throwing that out there. But anyway, so the Holocaust. What is a good that could have come from the Holocaust? So you said you've been there. I don't.
Yeah, I wasn't at the Holocaust.
Oh, right. No.
Actually, one thing I want to note is that we use the word Holocaust a lot to refer to the genocide of millions of people, mainly Jews. in the Jewish world, it's considered a Holocaust is a burnt sacrifice, and especially in the Old Testament, like that's kind of a big deal, a sacrifice to God. So using the word Holocaust is not exactly the term that a Jew wants to be referred to as. It's almost a little thing to call a Holocaust.
Okay.
They have a word that they use for it, and my mind's blanking on it right now, but I mean, I think for our common speech, we can just use another word for it. Just as a side note, just an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, I did make it to Auschwitz. I went to World Youth Day in Krakow, Poland, and I got to tour it. And yeah, if you get the chance to, I highly recommend it. It'll change your life.
Yeah, it would definitely bring out the reality of Hitler's onslaught. That would. Yeah, I never actually thought about the Holocaust in that way, or the term Holocaust.
I know it's something that we don't really think about because it's so culturally ingrained. But again, who was harmed the most? It was the Jews. And I'm not saying other people weren't, but it was mainly the Jews.
Germany was harmed very much as well. But
and I can even argue that Germany was harmed worse than everybody else, than even the victims, because when you look at what's happening, they're inflicting a bodily evil. They're making somebody else not living up to the good that they should envelop, that they should have physically. They are making they were, I should say. We want to be able to forgive people and love people, so we don't want to say all Germans now are bad, or even then.
That's why I try to typically say Nazi.
Into this cultural sin that's making their internal spiritual lives evil, which actually I think is a common misconception. So a lot of people say, "Oh, look, you really want to worry about your spirit and your soul and making it good and holy." That's true, but God gave you a body and a soul. He gave you your body, the material, and He gave you the soul, the form of it. The animating property. He gave you both of them. So if God gave you both of them, we're called to take care of them both.
Definitely.
However, we are fallen at the current moment. We're living in a state of sin where our souls will be separated from our bodies. They will be reunited, which means, at least temporarily, while in the state of sin, our souls are more important, because that's what's going to determine our eternity, if that makes sense.
And we'll supposedly have a different body too. Like, we'll have not necessarily a different body, but a glorified body is what we call it.
That's true.
We were actually, it was an interesting thing. John Paul and I were talking about this, how people tend to think of the body and the soul, or spiritual and physical, as opposites. But that is false in thinking, because they were designed together at the same time they were created. They were meant to go together. And why would you create something that is meant to go together? Why would you create them in contrast to one another? It doesn't really. It doesn't work. They would tear each other apart, but through the fall, we damaged that perfect unity between physical and spiritual. And, thus we get a lot of, we as ourselves, because we are both spiritual and physical, we are not to our fullest of what we could be, just because the spiritual and physical can no longer mesh together so perfectly. If you imagine it like a computer or some sort of hardware and a software that is meant to run with it, but then you go and change something, suddenly the software doesn't work right. You didn't affect the software, but they don't work perfectly with each other anymore, and so something's messed up in there. That's what the fall did to us. It was, you know, everything. It was a physical action that caused the fall, even though the fall is mostly spiritual.
Right. And to get back to the original question,
Yeah.
Holocaust
Hey,
and all these tangents, digressing points,
go back. You
which is
cut
good
out.
because that's how discussions work. The nature of a discussion works. But how is there any good? Like, how can there be a perceived somebody that
You keep cutting out,
something
Christian.
great, something greater is came from the Holocaust? What is that greater good?
Yeah, how did something greater come from the Holocaust? That is.
So, if you want my thoughts, I can share them. If you want to hash this one out too.
No, I want to think about this more before you give your answer, because I'm sure you have something good. I don't know. I'm trying to. You know, I'm still trying to come up with an answer that I would think of. Just think, yeah, that persecute. So I know Hitler would have said, you know, I don't know where did you were talking about, you know, the term Holocaust is a burnt offering. So where did we start calling Hitler's cruelty the Holocaust? Like, where did that come from? Did Hitler start that? Because Hitler actually said, like, he claimed as one of his lies that he was, like, an apostle of God, that God was behind him. That's why, like, he supposedly found the spear that pierced his side. And he claimed, and there were other stories, like a soldier who he could have killed in World War I. He could have killed this guy, but who was like wounded and unable to defend himself. He could have killed him, but decided against it because he couldn't find any moral okayness with it. So he didn't kill him, and so Hitler. It was supposedly Hitler, and he took that and adapted that story to be like, oh, see, God was behind me, and so. Did Hitler come up with the idea of calling it the Holocaust? Because he'd have thought he was doing something good. He claimed to be doing something good. But what's the greater good that did come? Because we know now, it's like a universal knowledge now that that it's bad. Like, everybody realizes how horrendous it was.
Well, and that's just it. I don't think everybody does. I think most people are incapable of fully understanding it unless you were there. And that's what I noticed when I toured Auschwitz. It's even when you're there at the location,
Yes.
that the most notorious death camp in World War II, you still don't get it.
Right. It's a new movie that just came out, The Unplanned. I went and saw it opening night. It was a good movie, but traumatizing. Like, no joke, in every way. It was traumatic. Like, I was crying for the next couple of days because of it. It was just that awful what you see. But so I'm like, I don't want other people to have to see that, but at the same time, that's how people are going to actually understand. If they're the only way they're going to truly understand is if they see it. So, you know, I get, you know, what you're saying the same way. None of us who didn't live through it will understand what the Holocaust, or sorry, not the you know, Hitler's actions, his horror. None of us will actually understand what that was like because we weren't there. We can know that it was bad, but we can't actually understand to the true extent of which. But so the question was, how is there a greater good that comes from that? Well, I would question, because, you know, well, maybe it hasn't happened yet. I'd imagine it probably has, but, you know, for one, we could know maybe there's something that would have happened in the future that was far worse. Or, my biggest thing that I'm thinking of right now, I don't know what you had in mind, but the biggest thing I'm thinking of is it was it could just be something like the world we're living in now could be the better that came out of it. Because if it hadn't happened, what would the world have been like now?
Right. And that's something we were not capable of knowing,
Right.
at least in our temporal state. Not saying that we ever become infinite like God. It's complicated. But, so first of all, I just wanted to read this quote. When I was at Auschwitz, they have a list of plaques in every single language, at least that I was aware of, that reads in the language. It says, "Forever let this place be a cry of despair, a warning to humanity, where the Nazis murdered about 1.5 million men, women, and children, mainly Jews, from various countries of Europe. Auschwitz through Birkenau, 1940 to 1945. So it's just really, because you go through and you walk through this whole place and you see everything, and then you kind of get back behind all the, because Auschwitz is broken up into two places. There's the actual death camp part, and then the place where all the prisoners live. And you get to the back of where all these prisoners lived, and there's these two, because at the end of the war, the Nazis tried to tear down as much as the camp as they could after they lost. They didn't make it very far. But you get back where most of it was kind of starting to be torn down, and it's right by where they have these like furnaces that were kind of being torn down, and they have all these languages, in every single language, these plaques with that statement. It's this really somber moment, but I guess the greater good that I could foresee in it is the idea of free will. Yeah, we might not know what's going on in the future, but we do know if God had chosen to make Hitler not do or have the choice, or any of the Nazis to not have the choice that they have, then we are incapable of truly loving God and incapable of fulfilling what we were originally created for. So by God stopping them from doing what they did to others, he would, in essence, be taking away everybody else's ability to love.
Yeah.
So really, there's always a greater good, and it might come down to the individual level where, some good, God can make any evil good. But I think that, like, the bigger picture, the broader picture here is God allowed this to happen. Horrendous things. Again, it's traumatizing walking by places and knowing that there's claw marks on the inside of these gas chambers, like on these concrete walls. Seeing that is just, there's no really way to describe it. But again, if God had decided to intervene at that moment, we're no longer fully capable of, because love, for it to be love, it has to be three things. According to Father Mike Schmitz, it has to be free,
Four things.
fruitful. Four things? Well, help me out
Free,
here.
total, faithful, fruitful.
Free, total, fruitful, faithful. If you take away the freedom aspect of love, then what do you have? You have every single princess movie you've ever seen where the princess is forced to marry some guy she doesn't love. And what is it? Like, she doesn't actually love him. She's just kind of being forced to do something. It's not true love because she didn't freely give it.
Right.
You can't force someone to love you. And God takes that and says, I'm not going to make you love me, but I'm going to give you the ability to.
The ability to, yeah. So we can love, but that's what's. So that was interesting. I remember you had a question a while ago about like why would God create the tree if He knew that we would if we would fall. He knew, like, He can see the future. He knows what's going to happen. So why would God have created the tree? Well, one thing is, I was always saying like that free will nature, it gives us the ability to have that choice. But there's a better answer that I learned that I like more. He first, we must emphasize the tree in its nature is not bad. We start to see that, we start to look down on the tree, think that it's something bad. God never creates anything bad. Because to create something bad would be to not have him. It would be lacking in God.
God created the lacking of himself.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense. And if God is as perfect as he is, why would there's no logical explanation to that. But it goes on. So, what does Satan tell Eve to get her to eat of the fruit? He says, should you eat of this tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not die. And God knows that. You shall become like him, knowing of good and evil. So, first off, Satan is not telling Eve that the tree will not kill her. He's threatening her. It's kind of like the same way that if the mob came to you and was like, oh no, you won't. They might not tell you, you won't die if you. Try to think of how the analogy goes. If the mafia or the mob comes to you and says, "Oh, you won't die if you buy our insurance," do they mean you're not gonna die if you buy it? No, that's it. Yes, you won't die if you buy it, but what they're actually saying is, if you don't buy it, you will. And so that's kind of what Satan's telling Eve here. Like, oh, you're not going to die if you don't eat it. If you do eat it. But you will. Like, he's threatening her. But then he goes on to say, you will be like God, knowing of good and evil. That's something, that's something desirable. Like we said, nobody does anything out of a desire of the evil for it. Nobody desires evil. They desire a good and might get it through an evil. But she sees that it is, that's something good. Like, oh, I'll be like God, knowing of good and evil. Satan is interesting because he's incapable of creating anything. He's not able to create something, so what he does is take something out of its rightful positioning. So it was God's plan all along for us to be like him. He built the tree. He made the tree for us to be like him. In that we just weren't ready yet. He didn't say, "Oh, don't eat of this tree," because he just wants to be cruel. No, he said, "Don't eat of this tree because you're not ready for it yet." And so the true sin is that, the tree was meant as a gift for humanity. But, like love, any gift, if it is taken and not given, it is no longer a good thing. So here's something that's good, that is meant to be given, and you're just trying to take it for yourself. Without that giving part of it, it's no longer good. It's taking something that is good in a way that it's not meant to be in, and it's no longer good. Yeah, so that's why did God create the tree if humans were going to fall? And this even goes as far as, it goes another level. So one, God wanted us to be like him, just we weren't ready for it yet. But furthermore, he knows that it will be even better for humanity should we have fallen, because in the long run, in the future, it makes us even closer to God than we would have been.
Yeah. Wise thoughts. What else you got?
Clock that says 12:10.
Yeah, all right. This has been fun.
It has been fun.
To everybody, thanks for watching. It's been a lot of fun. We're gonna hope to, I think, be doing this a little bit more often. These two brothers chit-chatting about, random thoughts that we have.
if anybody notices, I made the title of the stream Brothers in Philosophy. We're not literally brothers because we're both philosophy. We're brothers because we're literally brothers. And we like philosophy. It's a pun.
With that, this is about the time I come up with a cool catchphrase, like on the fly. Maybe for the next video. Good night, everybody.
Good night.